If I see a good idea, I'm completely comfortable grabbing that idea and putting my name on it and then running it in a game. It happens in business, you know. There's this crunchy gordito, and all of a sudden I can get the crunchy gordito at another Mexican restaurant.
13 seasons of professional football can go by in a flash, and I was grateful for every second of it. This game gave me everything, not without taking a few pieces of me along with it. Playing offensive line, it's been one of the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences of my life. Now, thanks to Audible, I look forward to sharing insights and stories with you of our favorite NFL stars and, of course, the fraternity of athletes that protect them. Offensive linemen are eternally bonded, and I am proud to forever be a part of the blocking brotherhood. I'm Ryan Khalil, and this is Block Forever. Welcome back to Block Forever. This is Ryan Khalil. Thank you again for making this part of your weekly football listening diet. I'm on a quest here. I'm on a quest to bring really high-level conversations about the intricacies of the NFL. I want to talk about play calling, about roster building. I want to know how to create a culture that stands the test of time, how to build a consistent winning franchise that doesn't just have a couple of good seasons, but seems to win year in, year out for a long period of time. There are few men more perfect for this kind of conversation than my guest today, Sean Payton. Coach Payton spent 15 years in New Orleans, winning almost 2/3 of his games, which is absolutely insane. Before that, he was an offensive assistant with the Eagles, Giants, and Cowboys. Coach Payton and we hit a bunch of really fascinating topics, including the push and pull he had with Coach Parcells when it came to play calling, how he had to coach against elite players with elite minds, and he also shared what it was going to take for him to get back on the sidelines. But before we dive in, quick reminder, tune in Thursday Night Football only on Amazon Prime. This week, it's the Titans. They travel to Green Bay to take on the Packers. I have to say, Lambeau is one of my all-time favorite places to play. There's just something incredibly magical about playing there, especially late in the season. It's an amazing experience I'll never forget. So tune in. And now my conversation with the great coach, Sean Payton. What's going on?
Ryan, how you doing, sir?
Doing great, Coach. It's good to see you outside of shaking hands after a divisional game. So I've been doing this show for a couple months now, and the best part is getting to do these deep dives into great minds of players and coaches that I've respected during my career. And we've had some incredible battles against the Saints over the years. I hated playing in the Dome in New Orleans. We always knew it was going to be tough sledding. You're at Fox now, but you said publicly that you would at some point like to get back into coaching. So, you know, looking back at your career, what have been the main factors that determine where you ended up? Because it seems like the franchises you coached for were more by choice than necessity.
I would agree with you. After Philadelphia, for 2 seasons, I went to the New York Giants, was the offensive coordinator there for 4 years. And then I went with Bill Parcells to the Cowboys for 3. And then my last 16 years with the Saints as a head coach. So every once in a while, you have a decision. You can go here or here, and that's kind of a luxury. And I would always advise when you're taking into account a decision like that, value winning in organization and culture over salary and title. Because in our business, to move forward and upward, it generally requires winning and success. Not always, but generally. And so the value of being, for me, for instance, in those final years of going with Bill to Dallas, I didn't know how much I was going to make, and he didn't have a title for me yet, and it was still, well, I'm in. I want this was advanced education, higher learning, if you will, from him. And I think that's important as you begin to decide on what your culture is going to be and what you want to do and all those other things.
I was listening to a Parcells interview, and he was talking about how when you were in Dallas, you just wanted to do a million more plays than he did, and he wanted fewer plays, but doing them more efficiently and simplify things. But you kept bringing him all these concepts and different formations. How, over the years, would you say your philosophy's evolved, and what kind of things led to that evolution?
I think if I could say one extreme, in Philadelphia, working under John Gruden, who was real sharp offensively and ahead of his time, and then putting some stuff together in New York as an offensive coordinator. We always start with how much volume, and so it's a great question, and I think I think more importantly, are we teaching the initial scheme? Are we going to go into a game and we're going to carry, for instance, these 18 runs? All right. So 18's kind of, well, what does that mean? Are there 18 formations with 6 schemes? Mm-hmm. But thinking about what is realistic here in a work week, so that we feel like we're far enough along that the most important thing is the players are playing fast, that we're not slowing them down and bogging them down with too much. And so then when I got to Dallas, Bill was extremely helpful in that balance for me. He'd look at the script. When he'd see a set of parentheses, so it would be, Fox 2, Delta Go, parentheses, mm-hmm. Harvey, or Strut Go. Bill would look at that and he'd say, is that 1 play or is that 3? Because he goes, these parentheses, they mean there are other parts to the call if you want to run a different version of it. But it taught me, and I understood from a head coaching perspective with where he was at. It's still and always will be a game that's tied to emotionally preparing to win, physically being rested and ready to compete at your best, and then having a good scheme. All of those things are important, and it was finding that balance. If we weren't executing, the first thing he would say is we have to reduce some of the variables, and you're only you go all the way to your slowest learner. In other words, he's got to get it, whoever that is. And then you got to go with, how's your team? Is it a veteran team? Are they thirsting for more? Is it a younger team? There are some variables on the other end that may allow flexibility on that end. And it doesn't mean that we're not creatively looking for ideas all the way up till the start of the game. I used to always hate that saying, the hay's in the barn on Friday. In other words, because Friday in the NFL was the day where after practice, players went home, coaches went home, got out of the building, and we kind of had dinner with our families, and then had a walk through Saturday and played Sunday. All of that is supposed to take place, but we're still searching, and not for new ideas that late in the week, but we're wanting to confirm that there isn't something we're not missing. And I can think of 2 or 3 different times something that was put in Friday morning. Something that it might not be that significant, but it was significant on Sunday. Mm-hmm. I think that it a little bit like I was using this explanation. If you're going to a trial on a Sunday, you want to make sure that you're constantly, are you missing anything before you go in front of a jury and present? It's that preparation that's exhausting during the week, but it's also fun.
And you're right. It's like you're watching film. Any little bit of advancement you can get before the game comes on Sunday. Any little advantage, you're just watching it all the way up. I remember especially when the iPads came out, we were still watching individual play up until like game snap. You're sitting there just trying to find any kind of little bit of edge.
Sure.
I had a really great conversation with Luke because I've been really curious, more so than ever, about what made him so great. And people always talked about Luke Kuechly being somebody that was calling out plays before they ever happened. And that guy studied more film than anybody I ever met. Walk me through when you're playing against somebody like Luke and that defense and what you're trying to do. Luke was very complimentary of you and saying that, I'd always think to myself, Sean's going to have something for us.
We played the New Orleans Saints, and New Orleans Saints run duo all the time. That's one of their core concepts. But whenever they start getting into the red zone, they like to throw like this like hard sell it pass, and like their number one receiver runs like a corner route. It just is like a real sloppy like fade, like find open space, get open. And so I remember I was like, all right, well, Sean's gonna have something for us. Like, I don't know what it is. And he always shows it to you to get your eyes on it. And then he wants to find a way to attack your eyes. So like this was 2018, maybe 2018, I want to say. They were going left to right. Came out the first series. They started in 3-by-1. They're in like 12 personnel or whatever, and they motioned a guy down and ran duo. And then the next series, they lined up in that and then snuck a guy out and Drew threw it over the top. And so basically what Sean's thinking is like, I'm going to show him duo early in the game. I'm going to get their eyes all over it. And then the next series, whenever that situation pops itself up, I'm going to show him that same look, and then I'm going to have something off of it. He's very intentional with how he does things, and I think he makes him a fantastic coordinator.
Luke's right. Like we would, if we were in pistol, every time we ran, just a simple slash 6 or 7 weak play from 4 wides. I remember we had that scheme, and every time we were in pistol, it was pretty simple. It was just a 1-back run at the bubble, and if you got a jam front, we'd throw it, and it wasn't anything. But I remember thinking, all right, let's put a naked in off of this. He's never seen the naked. And so Drew went through the mechanics of an opposite, like we were, going over here to the bubble. But what you fed him had to be something that he had seen. And we were counting on him watching a ton of film. In other words, the worst thing could have happened to us is if Luke had gotten sick and not be able to watch any tape. Because that's how much respect we had for his ability to key and diagnose. When you get a player like him that can quickly key and diagnose what he's seeing, react to it, he's a half step ahead of any combination block that's supposed to get to him. And then when you put a talented player like he is with good size and technique, then pretty soon you're 2nd and 9 a lot.
Yeah, having Luke on your team was like having a cheat code in Madden. But I'm curious, who were players like Luke on the defensive side of the ball that were seeing things at a much more advanced level, and how would that affect your plan of attack?
There's 2 players that I think of that if they saw, one was Luke and the other was Richard Sherman. And now Sherman would study receiver splits, but enough to where if by chance your receivers were always splitting inside edge of the numbers when they ran out-breaking routes, then you can rest assured Richard is going to file that away, and he's going to see that. And so the Kuechly plan, it would always be a series of plays that we were highly, 80, 90% this when we're in this alignment. Because look, defensive football, the number one ally for defensive football is formation and formation play recognition. So smart defensive players understand that if you have 2 backs, let's say the fullback's offset near, they can reduce what they have to defend. The young, inexperienced player, DB or linebacker, is defending every play on every down and not taking into account that play won't be run because it has to be. In other words, guys like Kuechly were able to see your backfield depth, were able to see tight end in the game, receiver splits, and go from defending, let's say, 60 plays very quickly to 2 plays based on film study. And it might be as simple as a guard light with his hands and know that he's getting a gap scheme or a play action, but you're constantly looking to reduce what you have to defend. And he was fantastic. He was like John Vilma at that. And so we would always, it would be long nights, and the coaches knew with me that it was going to be long nights because we were going to look hard at what our tendencies were. It's funny that he brings those things up because it certainly cost us, or we spent a long time trying to combat that strength of his, and it was truly a strength of his.
It's funny, you said something interesting about watching film around the league early in the week and looking at trends, and everybody always says it's a copycat league. I remember a game against you guys when we had Jeremy Shockey on the team, and Jeremy, God bless him, I loved playing with him. Wasn't always the most studious of details when it came to the game plan. And we had a play where he lined up on the wrong side. It ended up turning into like a weak side power, and D'Angelo Williams took it to the house. And we were giving him a hard time in the middle of the play that he was on the wrong side. And then after we scored, he's like, man, sometimes you just got to switch it up. And so, we got lucky on that. Sometimes it just happens and probably messed your defense up. Like, what is this formation? We've never seen this at all. And it just ended up being a mistake. But I remember the next week, there was like 3 or 4 teams our coordinator showed us that copied that same play around the league. And that always cracked me up and really, gave me a great insight into how coaches and organizations watch tape. I'm curious to know, I've heard this recently that, early in my career, and I'm sure this has been the case for forever, the NFL sort of set the standard as far as what the trends were, and it kind of trickled down. And I keep hearing more and more that because you're getting a lot of coaches at the high school level who want to be sort of these offensive gurus and innovators, that it's changing a little bit of how the players are being coached technique-wise. That's now trickling up to the college level. That's now trickling up to the pro level. We saw a little bit of that when we had Cam come to Carolina. I know we were watching a lot of Auburn tape and trying to do some kind of hybrid of a pro-style offense, and some of that read option stuff that he did in Auburn. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and what you're seeing in terms of, obviously watching a lot of college ball, and it is different. What are your thoughts on all that? I know it's a lot that I threw at you there.
No, listen, a couple things. Number one, the players we're drafting are the players we're drafting. We can't change what we're seeing them do. We're still looking at strengths, physical skill set. We're still looking, depending on the player, offensive lineman. We're still looking at measurables that we value. And there is a look. The offense itself. Let's just hypothetically pick one of the offenses, whether it's a West Coast offense, whether it's a digit system. The very first thing that comes to my mind is the simple language that we speak to communicate these schemes. But I would say, ultimately, and it happened with you and Cam, and it happened to some degree with us, with Breeze, have to adjust to, not just that position, but our skill set. And when we drafted Reggie Bush, for instance, and we had Deuce in the building, then we had to come up with some pony packages, not just to make them happy, because people would say, well, when they're on the field all the time, well, you still have to understand, hey, you might get nickel, it has to benefit you. And so we kind of came up with some thunder and lightning stuff that fit our personnel. And then when Breeze was signed, we studied the terminology that was used in San Diego and said, well, this is our first year as a staff. We're not married to any of it right now. We should certainly look at the quarterback that's coming here and say, we're all smart enough to learn the terminology he knows. And so you begin shaping what you're doing. But I think the big thing, and I'm going to give you a good example of this right now that's happened in front of our eyes. There was a lot of criticism of the Bears on offense with Fields. Mm-hmm. They played a Thursday night game against the Commanders, and they didn't play well. Washington won. The criticism was, hey, are you guys doing the things that Fields does well, And when you play a Thursday game, you got a weekend, you got a little bye there. And so credit Matt Eberflus and their staff and the offensive coaches and defensive coaches, but they had this extra time, and the very next game they played was against the Patriots, and they looked completely different. It began to look like, there were a lot of things that Fields was comfortable with. And so building that plan around the pieces that you have, I think is vital, and having a vision for what you're looking for then.
You talked about innovation in the game. Are there teams that you are watching in the last few seasons that you see are sort of doing some kind of things you hadn't thought of, or things that you're really, really impressed with?
if I was looking at the teams right now, I mean, Miami's doing some things that are unique formationally, and San Francisco, Kyle, I think, does a great job of putting together the run plan, and those guys, the play actions off of it and what they do. And arguably, they stress the edges of a defense as well as anyone formationally. And it starts with, they have two unique players. The tight end and the fullback are very smart. I'm not going to say they're interchangeable, but I do think that's a great ally for good quarterback play. We would have 6 or 7 teams that we're studying throughout the year. You'd say, well, we feel like they do some good things scheme-wise. We feel like some of it marries to what we're doing. And I think if I see a good idea, and it just happens to be Boston College versus Wake Forest, I'm completely comfortable grabbing that idea and putting my name on it and then running it in a game. It's no different than it happens in business. There's this crunchy gordito, and all of a sudden I can get the crunchy gordito at another Mexican restaurant. So we see that all the time. And certainly in our league, we see it.
What's your philosophy on personnel? I'm always curious about this. Obviously, organizations talk about F them picks, and I've heard guys say, no, you gotta grow them at home. I know Buffalo's a big proponent of that. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on how you sort of look at rosters and your schemes. And do you try to always find guys that fit within your scheme, or do you feel like it's more important to evolve your scheme around who you have and who's available?
Let me start on that. The vision and communicating the vision to the evaluators that are in your building, that are going out looking for players. I would say, man, the makeup became such a thing that was such a big thing for us, because one of the challenges, Ryan, when these scouts come back and we talk about learning, it's easy with the A learner or the B learner, but you never hear a college coach or evaluator, anyone say, he's a D learner. They get thrown into the C bin, and we have to figure out, all right, who are truly the C learners in this bin, and then who are the D and F learners? Because I would say the mistakes we've made have been on when we've drafted a player that intelligence was a problem, or they were too dumb to, so Jimmy Johnson said this once, hit me in the head with a hammer if I draft another dumb player. And so how do we sort the C learns? And so we spend a ton of time, either at the combine or at the Senior Bowl, bringing players in and really trying to sort through, will this player get it? Will he be capable of learning? Because it's not just the scheme that we're discussing. The poor learner is going to struggle with losing 2 games in a row. The poor learner is going to have trouble with trying to get a contract done and seeing his worth realistically within the framework. There's so many other things that become challenging for that player in our league, which is very complex, that, man, you have a lot of resources burned and time and energy burned trying to make that player successful. But once we all began to discuss the vision, in other words, we're reading a defensive back and we say, look, vision first year. We see him a 4-core special teams player because we see that he can play in the kicking game. I see him competing to be our 4th corner. And we articulate what we think the vision is, and then debate it if there is a debate. But I think having the proper vision for each of these athletes you bring into the building, you have a chance to supplement your roster a little bit in free agency. What's the vision with John Vilma? We see him as a starting Mike. We see him as the green dot wearer on defense. He's a great communicator. He's got a prior knee injury. The doctors tell us 4 to 5 years. They feel like that's going to be healthy. We see this player as possibly a captain of our, but articulate that. Now, ultimately, we're going to make a selection and make a pick, but the makeup, I think, is important relative to what we're looking for. And then, there would be certain traits that we look for on our defensive linemen. We want them to be longer. Running back, Parcells was great with this. They come in all shapes and sizes, but we want to see a lower body. So there were prototypes for each position. And establishing it is one thing, but then constantly talking about it so that when other people left the building, your scouts and your pro personnel people left and then came back in, they were bringing you what they felt like you were looking for.
Talking with a lot of guys around the league, and I experienced this a little bit towards the back half of my career, is the analytics coming into professional football and everybody trying to find a Moneyball angle to it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are and where the world of analytics is going and how much of that are you adopting and using versus, your experiences telling you, I don't really give a shit what the analytics say. Here's what my gut says.
I love this topic. Here's what I think. I think we spend a lot of time when we discuss analytics, we go to two topics. We go to 2-point plays and fourth downs. And I would say they represent maybe 0.5% of what I look at relative to analytics in the course of a year and how it applies to our team. There are so many other elements to the analytics. Like, for instance, on first and second down in the Canadian Football League, you got to get a first down and then you punt on third down. And so you've been a part of teams that had a game offensively where you may have made a number of first downs on first and second down. In other words, the game ends, you won the game, and you only had 9 third downs because you were so productive and efficient on first and second downs. And generally speaking, your better offenses are getting a first down on first and second down, not having to go to third down. I had a young player, administrator actually at the combine asked me why I didn't go for it on fourth down. We were playing in St. Louis when the Rams were there. And I remember the question. And I asked him, I said, what did you think of the matchup with my left tackle and Robert Quinn? We were starting a rookie left tackle from USC, and he was having trouble. Quinn had 3 hits, I think 3 sacks, 2 hits on the quarterback. So the variables that take place relative to some of those decisions, we just can't rubber stamp and say they fit for every team. How is the game going? Where are you at in the game? And how does it apply right there? And I tend not to really look at the 2-point chart until we get into the third quarter late. I've just seen it happen too much where you're chasing a point then, and so if it's a higher scoring game, that's one thing. It would be fourth quarter. If it's a lower scoring game, you might look at it at the end of the third quarter. And yet there's still some aggressiveness relative to making decisions. When you're playing a quarterback like Brady or Rodgers, we played Rodgers last year and we felt like, man, we're going to have to score and be aggressive offensively. And so the very first 4th and 6, we went for it, in the high red and converted, ended up scoring a touchdown. There's so many things that factor into the decisions.
You bring up such a fascinating point, and that's why I'm so interested in it, because I think one of the hardest jobs of a head coach, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is managing perception versus reality for your team.
Yeah.
And you and I both got to see the evolution of social media in the game. I remember coming into a locker room and guys playing cards and, really, seeing the groups of guys together in the locker room, being present, to my last day in a locker room where everybody was facing their locker on their cell phones, scrolling through social media. And
what happened?
I don't know. I just, it's fascinating. And I know some coaches have, they're more strict about it than others, but then it's like, I don't know what that balance looks like, and trying to stay, contemporary and make sure, the crew doesn't mutiny against you because, phones are outlawed. But I guess my question is, how do you in a modern NFL manage that?
I can recall, and it's funny you said that about the cell phones. In 2006, when I got hired, the social media hadn't arrived yet. It was a BlackBerry. If you had the most up-to-date piece of phone equipment, you had that BlackBerry, right? Or maybe you had a flip like me. I wasn't texting yet, but I had a flip phone. And the sign was like, hey, no cell phones on in the locker room. Like, in other words, if you were going to make a call or something, you went out to the loading dock or the cafeteria. Now it's entirely different. We take meeting breaks and the players, can get on their cell phones. I think now it's 2 hours prior to the start of the game when everyone has to be, in the locker room, that you can be on music mode. But, I don't want to see you, texting your aunt or uncle or your friends when the game's starting in an hour. But it has changed a lot. And I think even more so now, Ryan, that's why who you bring in and the makeup, that's even more important than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Well, I got to imagine it's going to get harder now because I just remember my process going from high school to college to the pros was always you need to earn your stripes here. There was always like some kind of humility check.
Sure.
And I don't know, with the NIL money and stuff, it feels more like it's going the other way where you have a lot of coaches who are put in a position to really kind of, pander to a kid that they're really wanting to bring. I mean, it's tough sledding out there for these guys, especially at the college level, trying to build a roster. And I just wonder what the fallout of that's going to be moving up the ladder.
That's what I love about the NFL job. I like wearing tennis shoes. I like wearing a Jordan sweatshirt, like a hoodie sweatshirt. I don't have to worry about dressing up for a booster. And look, your NIL money is going to be just simply earned based on your ability to play, and then we work on football. And I think that that's more challenging for the college coach than it is the NFL coach. Now, we're certainly going to feel a little byproduct of that, but that's that first training camp where we have a great way with veterans of de-recruiting people and making sure they understand where they're at in the program, and I think hopefully with the right leadership and the right guys, again, the right ingredients and like-minded. I always felt after we got the culture started and the program started, we felt a responsibility to the players that were already here, that we brought people like them here, because the scout wants that player to fit in, because he wants to have put his neck on the line saying, I like this guy. I can recall, listen, we went and worked out a few players in the 17 draft, and we were discussing Christian McCaffrey, who was a great prospect, and his grade and where it should be, and it was a first-round talent, and I think it was 115 would be the 15th pick of the first round, or 128 would be the 28th pick. I think Christian was 109, taken, I think, 9th by Carolina. And it wasn't Christian. I was frustrated that I thought Alvin's grade should have been higher. And I remember standing on a chair saying, Alvin Kamara is going to be the back that Christian, and we have him back here in the 4th round, And so I think the number one thing you want as a coach or someone in that circle from everyone, your assistants, your scouts, you want strong opinions in favor of or against. Every once in a while, someone can read a player, and when he's finished, you feel like I'm at the same spot I was when you started. You gave me all the things he does well, and you gave me all the things he doesn't do well. You gave me the reasons he's going to be good in this league and the reasons he's not going to be good. Do you like him or not? Do you really like him? And I want, those are the things I think a good scout or evaluator does. When they finish reading, you clearly get a sense that they think this player is going to help our team.
We'll end with one last question, which I have about the head coaching position. If I owned an NFL team, the guy I would want is a guy who has a ton of NFL experience like yourself, somebody with decades of experience, who's constantly evolving, who's constantly able to navigate what the trends are, what the principles of the game still are tried and true. But there are some philosophies of finding the new up and coming, coordinator, the guy who's the next McVay, who has who has a pulse on what all the newer innovative trends are. And then there's a new thing that just happened, which I'm curious to know your thoughts on, which is a former incredible offensive lineman, which I might be a little biased because I love the man and the player, who has zero pro or college experience, a little bit of high school experience, who is now the head football coach for the Indianapolis Colts. How difficult of a job is this going to be for Jeff? And what in your decades of coaching experience, and especially playing head coach, is advice that could fast track for Jeff that you would give right now in the short interim time that he's going to be there?
Well, I think a couple things. I think number one, the league's cyclical, and I know I've heard reasons why we want the head coach to be from the offensive side of the ball, that he's involved with the franchise quarterback and his development. I've heard all of that, but does that mean we're not interested in like a young Bill Belichick? Like, are we not interested in that guy anymore? You know, who's going to finish his career as the #1 coach in the history of the game, right? Super Bowl wins. So we're interested in guys that can lead, and we're interested in teachers, really good teachers. I think we're interested in guys that can communicate and that are intelligent, and they can move. They can create a culture in a building that's going to move a program forward. And to Jeff's point, or the hiring of Jeff, the same thing took place when John Lynch was hired by the 49ers. Not quite the scuttlebutt, but there was a ton of people in the league. Wait a minute, this guy hadn't scouted players, he hadn't. Now, but all he had done is demonstrated whatever he had done, he was going to be good at. And so the same way with Jeff, they're going to be, and he's going to be smart enough to understand what he doesn't know right now and make sure he gets that information if he needs to get it from someone else. But when that happened with John Lynch, I remember very clearly that hiring is questioned by a lot of people. Him going to become a general manager, you know, he never scouted, he was never in personnel, but there was this feeling that, hey, this guy's a doer, he's smart, and he's going to learn, and certainly learn on the run, just as Jeff is going to do. You know, there's a short window here, and he's going to dive in there. Well, you know he's going to be very loyal to the program because he was there when they won a Super Bowl and played in another. He was a part of all of that. And so the one thing about our league, all 32 of these are like restaurants, and every one of them is different. You open the door to the restaurant and you say, wow, this one's got lighting here and booths and it's decorated this way, and this is how the kitchen's run. And the other restaurant, they're all run differently, and they're privately run. Although they all compete in the NFL, I mean, they're just having worked in 4 different NFL teams, the differences are unbelievable. And so that's the Colts restaurant, and the owner there, Mr. Irsay, chose to say, hey, I want someone that I know firsthand, who's seen our culture, who's been a part of our culture, and has seen the winning side of all of that. I want some of that. So it comes on, I think, the heels of the challenges our league's facing with the hiring of minority coaches, because that's in that topic now we're trying to get right, and it's been challenging for the league. I mean, they've come out and said they've not done a great job with that. But I think in Mr. Irsay's case, you know, he's had Tony Dungy and he's had Jim Caldwell, and he's not been afraid to hire a diverse field of coaches or find the right head coach. But this was his decision, and I think, I think, look, this is when Jeff's going to wish that he had a little bit more time in the off-season program. This is when he's going to say, hey, who came up with these off-season programs? All right, with when we can spend time with our players.
Yeah,
and then
it was
someone
him,
in the
and it
meeting
was
room is
him.
going to say, Jeff, that was you.
Yeah, it was you. Exactly right. He extended his vacation time, and he ruined all the he ruined all the young guys getting ahead. Well, you compared teams to restaurants. You had gumbo for about 15 years. So what are we hungry for now? A little West Coast seafood, some Texas barbecue. What are we thinking, Coach?
Honestly, and I say this, I've had fun with this topic a little bit, but one of the things that I think our personalities or traits that we have as either former coaches or athletes is you want to be really good. And so I have been like really invested and dived into this role with Fox, and you really want to improve and you want to know, hey, you know, how can I improve in this area? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a time where I think I come back, but I don't necessarily think it's going to have to be this season. Like I enjoy where we're living here, and I enjoy the job I have, and each week I love when I get feedback. Like, you know, the first time you stand up in a studio was kind of awkward. Like, what do you do with your hands? And then how do you look at the camera? But I think most importantly, the topics that we hit on today, though, there's probably 8 or 9 clubs that maybe allow for those things to take place. And
well said.
Because you and I have seen it. It's not getting to a place where you're like, there's interference in this. And I don't mean you come in and you say, I need complete. It's not that at all. Mickey and I, my GM that I had in New Orleans, are close friends, best of friends. And in 16 years, there wasn't one time where he and I argued over a selection of a player or a cut of a player. Now, we would have knockdown, drag-out fights over the Christmas card that we were giving the company, or the cafeteria chairs, or over the carpeting in the locker room, because it was essential that we went through the process, talked through the process, and arrived at decisions in those areas. But yeah, our arguments were never on those topics of bringing in the right people. And so I don't take for granted that type of environment exists with every club. I don't think that it does. And so it's finding another place like that where, man, I realize how fortunate I was for 16 years to be in that type of structure, and support from ownership and support from front office, and then allow the culture to really move forward. And then pretty soon everyone in the building is trying to help. Everyone's involved in thinking the same way. That's when you have something.
Well, you're a great man, a great coach. I hated playing against you.
Yeah, same here.
I hope you come back. I think the league's better off having you in it. But appreciate the time, Coach, really do, and look forward to chatting in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Ryan, and I look forward to seeing you down here a bunch.
You can listen to Block Forever and other sports content on Audible. Audible is the home of storytelling, audiobooks, originals, podcasts, and more. Start listening free at audible.com. Incredibly grateful to my guest today, Sean Payton. It's always a joy to get to talk to the greats of the game and to get insights into a guy I competed against so many times during my career. It'll be interesting to see where Coach Payton ends up, if he can resist the urge to get back into coaching next year if the perfect situation doesn't arise, but we shall see. Before I go, reminder, Thursday Night Football, Titans at Packers. Should be a good one. I'll definitely be watching. Well, that's all I got, my friends. Reminder, new episode of Block Forever drops every Wednesday. Up next, I'm going to have a great one for you. I'll be speaking with legendary player, teammate, and talker, Steve Smith Sr. That's all I got. Enjoy spending time with your families. We'll see you again soon. This has been an Audible original production of Block Forever, produced by Fresh Produce and Audiorama. Matt Waxman is our lead producer. Sound design and edit by Kenny Holmes. Our producers are Kenny Holmes and Matt Schrader. Production assistant Ben Gerstel. And our talent booker is Kristen Dunn. For Audible, executive producer Pat Shaw. For Audiorama, the executive producer, well, that's me, Ryan Khalil. For Fresh Produce Media, executive producers Colin Moore, Joe Killian, and Jason Ross. Head of production, Elena Bovitz. Our supervising producer is Jamila Zara Williams. Production coordinator, Henry Koch. And our production manager is Herminio Ochoa. Special thanks to Powerhouse Capital and Mikey Fowler. And I'm your host, Ryan Khalil. Copyright 2022 by Audiorama Inc. Sound recording copyright 2022 by Audible Originals LLC.